Welcome to Book Talks with Colors of Influence. I am your host, Maylene Hamto. I am an avid reader and reviewer of books for my book blog, Colors of Influence. I also review books for outlets and platforms such as City Books, Halo Halo Review, Readsy, and the Nonfiction Authors Association. Book Talks focuses on fiction and nonfiction works, highlighting issues of diverse identities, equity and inclusion, social justice, Indigenous ways of being, and decolonial approaches to the struggle for liberation. I talk to authors whose works contribute to a nuanced understanding of various cross-cultural contexts of our shared humanity and common dreams. So the works featured in this web series will reveal essential truths about the author's unique perspectives. And I also want to point out that cultural context may focus on race, on gender identity, ability, ethnicity, national origin, immigration, socioeconomic class, and all intersections of identities. And in this episode, I am joined by Lori Wojtowicz, author of Listen to the Truth They Bring, which compiles 22 interviews that Lori conducted with her former students who are now adults with children and grandchildren of their own. So they offer their stories and their truths with unabashed honesty about what is needed to move towards social justice. Lori, who is affectionately known as Miss Y by her students, has spent most of her life in classrooms. She taught English for 35 years in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and now in retirement, she works as an educational consultant with teachers across the country. As the author of the book, Listen to the Truth They Bring, Lori says she is still waging war against the achievement gap, which evidences the inequities plaguing our country. Lori says that the highest accolade of her career came from a student who wrote, "You took our minds and handed them to us and made us think for ourselves. You helped us use the voice we always had, but were too afraid to use." Lori is very modest. She says that she knows the student was mistaken. The students helped her find out her own mind and allowed her a voice. It is because of them that she writes. Outside the classroom, she enjoys her family, her role as grandmother, her dogs, and riding her horse through the woods. And I also had the wonderful privilege of being an early reviewer of Listen to the Truth They Bring, and that's published on Readsy. So I will read a little bit about what I wrote, which provides a little more context about the strengths of the book. So through the power of storytelling, Lori challenges inherent biases in education, advocating for a more just and inclusive learning environment. Her approach to illuminating the issues facing students of color and the importance of creating supportive and empowering learning environments for all students is both enlightening and empowering. In a time when public school investments are dwindling and social justice-oriented education is under attack, Listen to the Truth They Bring offers unique perspectives that can inspire change and foster a more equitable educational landscape. The gift of Ms. Y's teaching journey and her reflective approach is her commitment to witnessing resilience and strength in her students. This is an engaging read for educators, for parents, and others engaged in improving the student experience. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you. So nice to be here.
Thank you for having this conversation with Colors of Influence. What is the significance of publishing this book during this period in your career?
As you said in my bio, I've been a teacher for a very long time, 35 years in the classroom and then continuing in classrooms around the country. And I've come to know three things that have remained constant through all those years. One is that the majority of teachers are white, and I am one of them. The next is that classrooms continually become more diverse. And the third is that the achievement gap between students of color and white students is still very much alive. And so, I've done a lot of reading, a lot of research on my own. I've attended workshops and seminars, and I've learned a great deal. But equity is still elusive. And so I began to think, I'm going to try a new source of knowledge. And I got the idea to reconnect with some of my students who are now, as you said, adults, raising families, children in school systems, grandchildren in school systems, and ask them, what is it that we missed? What is it that we need? And give me a new perspective. And, they're not the esteemed experts, but they are honest voices of lived experience. And so that's where I went and was very grateful for everything that they contributed.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely a great read and very heartwarming as well as heartbreaking as well, right? Like just being able to listen deeply to the stories, and there's a lot of pain and triumph integrated into all of that. And in the process of creating this book, in gathering those stories, what did you learn about yourself in the process of writing and publishing it?
First of all, I would say I was humbled by the students because, first of all, not one student turned me down. And I had to search to connect with them again. They're all over the country. And I had always thought that I learned the most in the classroom from the students. It was the very same now as adults. I felt like I learned so much from their stories. I also learned that I hadn't been as good a listener necessarily in the classroom as I had hoped I was, because they told me many things that I had missed as a classroom teacher. So humbling is certainly one of the main things that I learned.
Miss Y, I wish I had you as one of my teachers.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
I think it would have been a really great experience, a very, very affirming experience for, someone like me in a classroom, kind of, venturing into this American landscape. I myself am an immigrant, and I know that in the stories that you have brought up, a lot of the students, all of the students have, you know, identities that are different than yours. And so
Absolutely.
very much appreciate the humility that you mentioned, and you don't only talk about it. Yeah, you've really exemplified it in your career.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I was wondering, can you identify a section of the book that all readers must absolutely read? Yeah, if you could read a short excerpt, that would be great.
I would love to. I just want to give a little context
Sure.
to this quote. One is that when I started thinking about what to share with you, it was the night after the election, this recent presidential election. And this one quote just kept coming to my mind again. And so that is the one I'll read. But it's by a young adult man named Shay Carter. And Shay Carter was my student. And when he was, I would have described him as very bold and very honest, and very bright. The school administration labeled him as defiant, and often he spent a lot of time in the detention center, from being thrown out of classrooms. And the irony of all of that is, when I went to interview him, it's right back to that detention center that I went. And he's sitting there now as a man nearing 50 as principal. The detention room has been converted into the principal's office. The irony of that, the beauty of that, was certainly not lost on me. And now he sits as a very powerful figure and leader, and certainly someone who believes in equity and improving education for all. So this is Shay's comment to me. So Shay says, quote, "Lately, I've been wondering what it means to be an American. I can't put my finger on who we are. What's our identity as a country? What do we want to be?" His thoughts revealed his vacillations between hope and frustration. He told me, quote, "The foundation of the country was built on inequity. The Constitution wasn't written for me. The blueprint wasn't designed for you as a female or me as an African American. We were supposed to create a space for the higher society to function. When the foundation is weak and fragile and fragmented, no quick fixes today will work. We have to go to the root cause, and that seems to be too painful. We don't seem to want to do it." But Shay is not deterred. As he said, "I've got my mind on resolutions for redesigning institutions, not the whole world, That's just too big. But what if we focused on healthcare and education, just those two? Both of those impact people greatly, but everything is monetized and we spend our money on what's important to us. I don't see education or healthcare getting more money. It doesn't seem like we hold anything sacred enough to say we're going to monetize this in a way to do the right thing by all people. Why don't we invest in them by all kids? We don't look at the human capital. I wonder why. We're chasing things that don't align with humanity. His comments made me think of something I had read by I never know how to say his name, but He Coates. And he had written in Between the World and Me, I was a curious boy, but the schools were not concerned with curiosity. They were concerned with compliance. And now I have to wonder if within classrooms and the country, we are more interested in compliance with the system already in place rather than curious about why the system still fails so many.
Those are powerful testimony, and I appreciate you sharing the background about Shay, having kind of been in detention centers, etc., and now leading schools. So there is some hope there, but out of every Shay that comes up, right, from those tragedies, there's also a lot of kids, a lot of students that kind of fall through the cracks and never get the opportunities and achieve what they must in their lives. And so I appreciate
Absolutely.
you mentioning that, and sort of the intersections of sort of our own personal responsibility to change the system and the systemic issues that we all must address and focus on.
Absolutely.
Sharing, yeah. And the next question, Miss Y, is that, you've kind of alluded to this earlier, but I was just wondering if what did you find most challenging about the process of writing and completing this book?
I will admit that when I started it, I kind of thought, well, this will be easy because it won't have to be my words. It will be their words. So somehow that sounded like it was going to be a much simpler task to just report what they said, and there you go. But they overwhelmed me with their brilliance. And so to give power and credibility to these stories took a great deal of rewriting. And it made me have to question myself all over again about what did I know of them then when they sat in my classrooms, and who have they become now? And how do I do that story justice? So it was much more difficult than I thought.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lori, for sharing that. And when I read the book, I thought, this will be great for all teachers to read, like school administrators, anyone that is touching the lives of students in classrooms. And so in addition to those folks, who needs to read this book and why?
I will tell you that when I wrote it, I was definitely thinking about white educators like myself. And one of the reasons is I feel like I've watched myself on such a journey from when I started, and that was in 1977. And I was a very naive, um, idealistic child who believed in meritocracy. I believed, as my parents taught me, everybody is equal. This is how I went in. But I was raised, sometimes I like to call it in the land very white, a land of only white. So nothing ever really contradicted my view. And I came to teaching at a very diverse high school with those beliefs in place. But the years dismantled a lot of that belief system that I had held, because I began to realize, and it took me years, I will admit that, in my naivete, to realize that I was teaching a lot of the honors courses. And in those classrooms, mostly white and Asian students were in the class. I would see African-American students and students of color in the hall, but I began to ask myself, Why are they not sitting in my class? And that began a very long process that I think white teachers in particular still need to grapple with. Because just because we work in a diverse school, if it isn't equal education and equal opportunity, and if students of color are not sitting in honors courses represented, something is still very, very wrong in the system. And so definitely white educators was what I began. But I have to admit, the more I wrote, the more I listened to the students, they offered a lot of insight about America today for them and their views on the country and how they feel as American citizens. And so that got me thinking there's a broader group of people who I would hope would read this book and consider their stories.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lord, Miss Y, for mentioning that. I myself, I mentioned I'm immigrant here from the Philippines, and I have, worked in education and other fields throughout my career, and I found a lot of great nuggets in the book. Reflecting the experiences that I have seen my colleagues, young people that I knew, and at the same time, I also really appreciated how you modeled, that humility and really recognizing your own, positionality as a white teacher and modeling that for other white educators as well. So thank you for for really highlighting that. Um, what is the one lesson you want readers to walk away with?
I think the one thing I would say as an educator after all this time that I've really come to believe is the power of listening. And I think, I don't think we do it service in the classroom. I had a student, she's in the book, and she said, there were a few teachers that I had who truly empowered me. And I thought, oh, there's that word that I love, empowered. And I said to her, well, how did they do that? And she said, they listened to me. They didn't judge. They truly gave me a platform to speak what I believed. And I started thinking about the shared power that listening has. Yeah, it's power for both the person who's speaking, but also the person who's listening. You get to share power in that. And so when I finished the book, I thought, I hope people read it with this question about how do they listen? Is it with judgment? Is it with, oh, I could fix that situation? Or are you really trying to understand another person's experience that is different than your own? So that was the first, for sure. The second is to remember it's the students who are powerful. Sometimes, especially with white educators, you can fall into a kind of a stereotype of the white teacher who saves all these students of color. And that is such a lie. Students save themselves every single day in classrooms by their own power. And so that is not what this book is about. It is truly giving voice to the power of the students who sit in our classrooms.
That's really powerful, Lori. And I just have a quick follow-up question, and I think you may have already addressed this, but why do you think it's difficult to do that deep listening that you mentioned?
That is such a great question. I honestly think it really comes from the way even white educators have been educated. And there is a sense of we have the knowledge and we're going to give it to someone else. Uh, when in truth, our knowledge is very limited. And many of us, who are especially my age, grew up with such a stilted view of history, of world contributions. So we are almost passing that on to students when in fact we should be saying, teach me about your culture and your experience and help me broaden my experience because of that. In that way, I would better serve if I did more listening.
Appreciate that reminder, Lori. And I just want to, make before we And I just wanted to make another plug for the book, Listen to the
Oh,
Truth
thank you.
Degree. It's so apt for these times, right? That it has always been relevant, as you mentioned, equity. We are still, kind of fighting for equity in the school systems, etc. And perhaps in this particular, you alluded to the political, the recent elections. In this current social political climate, it is more necessary for us to continue to listen to each other, particularly the experiences of people who do not share our identities. So thank you so much for writing this book and devoting your whole life to empowering the students, find their way.
I have to
Oh,
interrupt
go
you
ahead.
just to say, while I thank you so much for that, I am so excited to contact all 22 of these students and say, your voice really is getting out there. And that is the most exciting piece for me of the whole deal, that they will know they are being heard.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lori. Appreciate that. And one last question. I know that many of your years as a teacher were devoted to addressing African American literature. Do you have any reading recommendations for our readers?
I do, and some are very old. It makes me laugh how old I am, but the autobiography of Malcolm X is pivotal, absolutely pivotal to my career, because I grew up with the belief from my parents, from society at large at that time, white society, that Malcolm was a very bad American. Martin Luther King was a good guy, but Malcolm X should be feared. And then when I read the book finally and listened to his own words and began researching him, I realized the lies, and that this is a man of education. This is a man of self-worth. So that would certainly have to be top of my list. Lots of writings by James Baldwin, same thing, just impacted me and my view of the country in such great, deep ways. More currently, I would say Bettina Love is someone that I have really listened to in her readings, and Brian Stevenson in Just Mercy truly affected me. And then, and as I say, I always destroy his name, but Ta-Nehisi Coates, both Between the World and Me, and his most recent, which I'm now reading, The Message. They're just extremely impactful books for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much for giving us that reading list, Miss Y. Really do appreciate your time. And before we close, I just wanted to kind of open it up once again for any last final words that you might want to mention or share. Mhm.
Um, hmm. Education has just always been my passion. But the fact that I know in my core that I'm a better educator now because I remember to be a student more is what makes it all still so exciting and so worthwhile.